Welcome back. This is Jetfires, and this is Project 2, Lesson 2, and we're done with the prep work, and now we need to start UV mapping. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and select the entire object again, and in object mode, and make sure I delete by type history, okay, and a center pivot for everything. So if we click on something, we can hit the W key and it's centered off that object. Okay, so one of the things I like to do is select the entire object as an object, and because it's all cleaned and everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and do a special save file, and we're going to do export selection. Click on the option box. We're going to file type I'm going to do is a my binary, and I'm going to click export selection, and I'm going to call this something special that I can go back in here, something like your name and medium poly start UVs. Okay, and with this, what you're going to do is you're basically going to save just your object that's medium poly ready for UVs, and basically name it like start UVs. So if you mess something up, you can actually come back to this, import it into your scene, because we exported it into your scene, and start over if you want to. Basically, this is a cleaned up model, and we can from scratch before we texture it or UV map it. So export the selection. Okay, so now I'm confident and ready to go. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay out UVs. So let's talk about UVs. We're gonna lay these UVs out as UDIMs. Okay. What is a UDIM? Basically, what that means is that it allows us to have up to like 999 UV maps. The thing is that visual effects and film and even gaming are using UDIMs to lay out UVs. They're a lot more efficient, and they allow us to group these objects as materials. So let's say I know what I want to have the parts to be plastic, like black plastic. So I would look at everything on her as black plastic. What would be black plastic? And that would be, we would put those UVs together in one UV map. Okay, I'll explain that more as we go along, but I do want you to start thinking about what your materials will be. Let's say the back is more of a cushion or a leather maybe, or vinyl. The top would be plastic or vinyl or padded leather or something like that. These side pieces would be like chrome or brushed metal. This piece might be rubber or might be cloth because the wiring goes into the back. So those are the things you have to think about. You have to break these up into materials, and that's kind of how I want you to think about that. It's going to be a little different for you to think about it that way, but that's what I want you to think about. And it'll make more sense as we move along, and it'll be very helpful for you. Okay? So the next thing we're going to do is, not everything's separated out. I need to add a UV texture to this, a UV map. Right now it's just a jumbled mess because I've been extruding and extracting and separating and all that stuff. So it's really important that we look at this by itself. So what I would do is I do a Control-1 just to kind of isolate this. Okay. One of the things, if you get lost or something happens with this object and you can't twirl around it, basically if you select the object and hit the F key, it will focus on the center rotation of that object's pivot. Okay, what if that's not working? Then if you're working on something, you can just click on anything like an edge and hit the F key, and it will focus on that and rotate around that particular area. So you can see how that's rotating around that because it's found its pivot point. Okay, that's how focus works. So if you're UV mapping and you get stuck or something and you're not rotating the way you want to, just hit the F key. Okay, all right, and that will rotate around that particular object. Another thing about UV mapping and cutting everything up into seams is that anything that has a 90-degree angle is a natural seam cut, and you want to cut there. What does that mean? What is a 90-degree angle? Well, it's something like this. It's an edge, okay, like that goes all the way around. That's why it's so important that I'm always talking about edge loops and stuff. Now this particular object is very complex, okay? So it might take a little bit for me to get all those edge loops in there, okay? It may take longer than one video. So so just remember that. So that's what we're going to be cutting. We want to tell Maya where the edge loops or where the seams should be. We don't want Maya telling us where those are at. Okay? And there are certain cuts. Whenever you have a blocky object, you want to cut those into different parts. Okay, separate parts. Okay, to lay the UVs out properly. Okay, we're not wanting a lot of UV cuts or seams, because those are very hard to move around and make look like they're one solid piece. So I'll show you how to lay out UVs, and we'll explore and experiment with this. And this is a complex object. I did the boot the last time in class, but that kind of thing takes a long time. But you'll get better and faster at it as the more you do it. All right. So you can see that we're in edges. So right-click over it and make sure you're in edge mode. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do, actually we need to do one more thing. I forgot. We need to add a texture map on this, or excuse me, a texture UV set. To do that, you have to go to UV. Okay. You have to go to, we're going to do planar on all the stuff, because if I do automatic, what happens is it breaks it up into smaller pieces, and it's very difficult to get the UV seams right. And since I know I'm going to do all the UVs on this by hand, I'm going to click on planar. Okay, and if I do that, it will planar map. Now it doesn't really matter where it's planar mapping. It could be up or down or sideways or whatever. But you probably want to go on the area that's the surface is facing. So this is in the X. So if I were to do that again, let me click on the object, go to UV, and then go to planar mapping. Go into the option box. And you can see, you can tell it which direction to UV map. The direction that I see is going to be X. You can see that right here. So that's the X value. That has the most surface area of the object. So I'm going to click on X value and click on project. Okay. Now when we look at this in the UV editor, go to UV editor, and this will give you your toolkit. Okay. And this is your UV editor. Okay. We want to keep everything within UVs, right? So, but this is a very poorly represented UV map, because obviously we're going to have stretching like crazy everywhere. And if I click on, I'm going to move that out of the way a minute. If I click on this guy right here, this gives us the checkerboard, and it lets us see where all the stretching is. Now, notice that it does a great job with the with texturing the area that it was projecting on, which is the X value, but you can see in the Z value it's stretched. Okay, all that is stretching right there. Okay, we don't want that to happen. Okay, all right, and the back actually looks terrible. Okay, so anything facing the X value does texture well. Okay, all right. So that's not what we want to do. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to. I'm not gonna focus on the UV map now in the UV editor, so I'm going to move it over to the side. And what we are going to kind of focus on is the UV map itself, UV mapping itself. So I'm going to go to the edge mode. Okay, and now we're ready to UV map. Okay, so anything in 90 degrees or more or close to it can be textured. So you can see that I've got an edge right here. Okay, so I'm going to double click on that. Okay, and you can see we need to get into the seam mode. Okay, to do that, I'm going to click on edge mode again and click off. Okay, so I'm in edge mode. I'm going to turn off. You can see I can turn this off, so get rid of that so it doesn't get in the way. And we're in edge mode now. So what I want to do is I want to go to UV and 3D cut and sew UVs. Okay. All right. It says drag to cut, control drag to sew. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is we're going to get started here, and now we're in the 3D cut and sew UV tool. Okay, so right here, this is a good spot to make that cut. So I'm going to cut all the way around that area there. So I made that cut all the way around. The reason why I didn't cut on the edge here, I could if I wanted to, and probably should have. So I can always go and hold the control key. I'm holding down the control key, double clicking it, and double clicking it, and it should go away. And it takes me a little bit longer. There's a delay in here because I'm using Camtasia, so I've got to be patient. So I'm going to add, so I'm going to hold the shift key down and double click on this edge. So I'm going to click on this one and then double click on that one, and that should go all the way around. Okay, it should. If it doesn't, just keep going until it does. There it goes. So there's my first cut.